Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm a grateful recovering codependent. Let's see. So I guess today I kind of want to talk about what got me into CoDA in the first place. My story pre-CoDA and how I guess I became my codependent as I was. So I grew up in a fairly dysfunctional childhood. One of my earliest memories is my mom locking me in the basement and leaving me there for like 4 days, and just doing what I needed to do to survive. She didn't really know how to parent me, so when my dad would leave, it was very, very different. And my family grew up very, on paper, successful, and so there was a lot of present one way in public and behave another way in private. And that became very hard to manage and know when to tell the truth or when to perform. And I was just very quiet, didn't really speak, didn't really say anything. And I kind of developed this attitude of like, okay, my parents leave me alone and I'll leave them alone. Because the one thing I wasn't allowed to have was needs, and the one thing I wasn't allowed to say was no. And so I did the best I could with what I had, and went to elementary school. I met my like best friend, and we were like really, really close. And then my brother had autism, and so my parents were like, watch over him, take care of him while he's at school. And he was 3 years older than me, so I felt this kind of strange, even though I was the younger sibling, I felt like I had to be the older sibling with the younger sibling responsibility, or privileges, but the older sibling responsibilities. So I felt overly responsible for that relationship. And then one day my parents sat me down and they said, we are pulling you out of your school. This was kindergarten, and we're putting you into a Catholic school. And we are, and I'm not Catholic, and I just said like, okay. And I immediately went back to my room. I got all my stuffed animals together. I'm like, how am I going to talk my parents out of this? How can I convince them to keep me at the school I want to stay at? Just because Carson's struggling doesn't mean that I was. But they wanted me to kind of take care of him while he was at Catholic school. And then I went from basically like a freewheeling, easygoing public school environment to a very buttoned up Catholic school environment. I had to wear a uniform. I couldn't express myself. They were very, always dragging me out by the left hand, because the devil's hand. So I had to become right-handed just to fit in. And they didn't have any left-handed desks either. And they were just like, do this, do that. And then there was probably I can't fully remember, probably some inappropriate behavior by members of the clergy. And I began to really struggle with my mental health after being like physically, because school was my safe place. I always had a place outside, and losing that, I kind of just fell deep. And my mom was really, just getting hit a lot. My dad was just very, I don't know what to do. So they took me to a child psychiatrist. And rather than address some of the deep mental illness my parents were experiencing, we left that day after a 1-hour appointment with me with a bipolar diagnosis and a prescription for lithium. And at 7 years old, I was put on adult doses of lithium, which is wildly unethical to diagnose a child with bipolar, and even more unethical to put that child on mass doses of antipsychotic medication. But at the time, there was a huge push to put kids on medication, in my personal opinion, because of the drug companies and what the shareholders wanted, not necessarily what was best for the kids. And it kind of glazed me over from myself. But then I moved to an arts magnet school, and music was my secret. Music was my secret weapon. Music was my secret strength. I would go to church every Sunday, and I was a countertenor, so I was always singing in like, Misera May. I was hitting the high notes, and I loved singing and music, but I never thought it could be anything more than a playtime, because my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse, a pediatric oncologist, my dad's an otolaryngologist, my grandpa's a doctor. There's no music outside of my grandma in my house. And at the same time, unfortunately, at the same time, my grandpa died. So my mom kind of had someone to take care of. That wasn't me. And the more she left me alone, the better I did. And I was cast as like Prince Charming in the school musical of Cinderella, and I sang 10 minutes ago. And then my grandpa passed. My mom got really over-involved in my life. I couldn't say no. She would just show up to my school, and she'd like hit the kids and yell at them. And one day, one of the teachers threatened to call Child Protective Services on her because I told one of the teachers what was going on. And by the end of that week, we had decided we'll be moving schools again. So there wouldn't be any paper trail to follow. So I felt really, really out of control in my life, and this went on. You know, my mom would adjust medications and change medications, and then when she started gaining weight, she put me on Abilify, so I became 300 pounds. And whenever she would gain weight, she'd call me fat, even if I was bone thin. Whenever she would have a bad day, she'd call me crazy. It was very much a form of everything negative was displaced onto her extension, and everything positive was hers, even if it was mine. So I didn't have any identity. There was no level of differentiation. And I always thought, oh, I was just crazy, because of why would all of these intelligent doctors agree that I was mentally ill if it wasn't true? And so, like no bipolar person ever, I stayed on my medication without one day off for 18 years, until one day I got mono. And I was in my third college, struggling with my mental health, struggling with my physical health. I lost a lot of the weight, but that really wasn't fixing anything. I still had deeply rooted compulsive behaviors that I just could not understand. And I just forgot to take my medication for a week, and things got significantly better. And I was like, have you guys ever seen Mrs. Doubtfire, where it's like she realizes that Robin Williams is Mrs. Doubtfire, and she goes, the whole time. I was like, oh, okay. So my bones, when they said that this isn't good for me, was telling the truth. My gut, when I said this isn't the right decision, was right. I know what was best for me. I know what would make me feel safe. I may have not known all the best things to say or the best way to express it, but I knew what felt safe for Matt. And that was pretty consistently gaslit out of me. I think that without a couple of saving graces, I would have turned into my mom or my dad, one or the other, because that's all I knew, but I did know better because I had my grandma. Weirdly, my mother's mother, but they weren't close. I think that they all wanted to be like their dad, and none of them really valued her. So but when my grandpa died, I started spending a lot of time with my grandma's. And she did things like, she had a pile of drawings that I would draw. That was just like, whatever, or writings that I wanted to write. She wouldn't let anybody touch it. That was my pile. I had a space of my own. I had something that was mine. I mean, my own room wasn't mine. My mom could come in barging, screaming, what did you do? Anytime, I would just wake up to screams. It was just crazy. And so, my grandma's had a space of my own. I could sleep at hers. I could feel, most importantly, I could feel all my feelings at my grandma's. And that wasn't it wasn't pathological. She would always say, Matthew, everything you're feeling is normal and natural, and you're okay, and I love you. And she loved me on my good days, and she loved me on my bad days. She loved me when I screwed up, and she loved me when I did well. And it didn't mean that she tolerated all of the things that I did, right? And it didn't mean that she could be there every second all the time, although she was mostly always a call away. She was retired, and she definitely prioritized me, which was also different. I was top of the list for her behind herself. I remember one day her good friend she did gymnastics in the 30s, had died, and I walked in, and she'd been friends with that friend the whole time. They talked on the phone almost daily. I remember my grandma was crying, and I said, Grandma, thank you. Can I please talk to you? Something had happened at school. In elementary school, everything feels like the end of the world. And she's like, no, I can't talk to you today. I need to take care of myself. And how profoundly different that was than my parents' reactions. Oh God, another crisis, here we go, we have to take care of it. Needs in my family were pathological. That was the real pathology in my family. And no was unacceptable. And so then also I had Linda, who had worked for our family for 3 generations, and she kind of saw how bad things were. Whenever my parents would go on vacations, I'd stay with her. Habla español porque, mi tía es muy importante a mí. Yo quiero, like communication con mi tía. So I wanted to learn how to speak from her, because she didn't speak a lot of English, but she's very wise. And she worked for not just my parents or my grandparents, but some of the wealthiest, fanciest people in all of Portland. And if they'd asked her to do something, and she'd go, no. I'd just say, like, what? What's that word? No. It made her better. Her no made her better, because it said that I won't do that. Could you do this for $100? No. It just, no. And I was like, what is that word? That brilliant word that made them leave her alone. Because I needed to learn that. And so just finding these 2 powerful women who were my family adjacent, my grandma and mi tia, and who really embraced me and loved me as I am. And I didn't need to change or present for them. I could just be mad. And having that as a dichotomy to the psychosis and narcissism of both my parents was really, really powerful. And then Thea's been really struggling with depression, and she has 4 grandkids now, and so it's a whole different scenario because she lives with them. And my grandma passed last November. And I joined ACA in October, and it was the most dramatic. Like, people were trying to put her on life-altering medication before she was ready, and it was just horrible watching her suffer. And I hated seeing her like that. And part of me is like, I felt so guilty that I couldn't rescue her. But I knew I wasn't ready, because I loved her enough to not try to take care. I knew that I couldn't do better than this, and I knew I wasn't getting involved with that toxicity, and I think that she accepts that. But she passed, and I'd always hold her hand. Whenever I'd come over and I was crying, she'd always hold my hand, and I'd always play with her rings afterwards, because I'm a freaking fidgeter. And it was my grandpa's ring from Scotland, and my grandma's ring from Kinsley's. And so then I called my dad, because don't talk to my mom. I called my dad about grandma's burial stuff, and she said, and my dad was telling my mom what to say, and my dad was like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. I'm like, okay, like, this isn't an Iraqi hostage video, please give mom the phone. Mistake. She took the phone, she goes, hi Matt, I'm so sorry about grandma, it's so sad. Anyways, and everyone in the family knew all I wanted was the rings. So, anyways, we buried grandma last Monday, and it was really, no one was there, just the cousins and the, grandkids and everyone, and Linda, everyone was there except for you. And I buried the rings with grandma because I didn't really want them, and Mary didn't really want hers, so I just buried them with her. Anyways, is there anything of grandma's you may want? Knowing that was the one thing I wanted, I'm just kind of throwing this 300-year-old family heirloom in my face. And I just kind of lost it. And I reached this point of like, every single person in my family enables this, and I can't do it anymore. I can't enable cruelty. That's not who I am. That's not who grandma would want me to be. And I was in ACA, and that Sunday I went to CoDA. And they read the patterns, and it was so hurtful that I said, oh, well, I'm not a codependent. And then they're like, and here are the denial patterns. And it was every single way that I tried to convince myself I wasn't codependent in 5 minutes or less. And so I was like, yep, okay, I am a codependent. So what do I do about it? And then they had a step meeting on Friday, and now there's a men's meeting on Monday, and I've gone to 4 retreats, and I've really engaged in boundaries and differentiation from my abusers, and miracles have just shown up at my door the second I let go. Every single time. And it's about saying yes, and it's about surrender, and it's about letting go, and it's this thing that I can't even, like, I feel like grandma was physically with me, and now I feel her with God, and through her and through him, I feel that recovery. Thank you so much.